You wake up every single morning, you pour that cup of coffee, and you look at the bills on your kitchen table, and you feel that pit in your stomach because the cost of living in this country has spiraled completely out of control. You worry about whether your car is going to be there when you walk out the front door, or if your kids are safe walking to school, or if the border crisis is finally going to spill over into your quiet suburban neighborhood. These are the real, tangible nightmares keeping hardworking Americans up at night, the kind of problems that require serious people to sit down and find serious solutions. But when you turn on the television to see what your elected officials in Washington are doing about it, what do you see? You don't see leadership, you don't see solutions, and you certainly don't see anyone fighting for you. What you see is a circus, a calculated, high-decibel performance designed to distract you from the absolute wreckage the radical left has made of this country. We are watching a coordinated theater production, and the latest star of this show is Representative Jasmine Crockett, who recently decided to use the People's House not for legislation, but for an audition tape for her next cable news appearance. We have to talk about this recent hearing because it encapsulates everything that is wrong with the modern Democrat Party and their media allies. It is a masterclass in projection, gaslighting, and the dark art of blaming your political opponents for the very disasters you created. They want you to believe that up is down, that left is right, and that the party of defund the police is actually the party of law and order, while the party of back the blue is somehow abandoning the rule of law. It is insulting to your intelligence, it is insulting to your memory, and quite frankly, it is a slap in the face to every victim of the crime wave that has swept across this nation under the Biden administration. Jasmine Crockett sat there and unleashed a tirade against Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, screaming about corruption and misuse of funds. You have to appreciate the irony, almost thick enough to cut with a knife, of a Democrat lecturing anyone about political corruption while the current occupant of the White House has a family business history that looks more like a grand jury exhibit than a resume. But let's strip away the theatrics and look at what is really happening here, because this isn't just about one congresswoman shouting into a microphone. This is about a strategic pivot by the left to rewrite history before the next election cycle. They know they cannot run on the economy because Bidenomics has decimated the middle class and made the American dream unaffordable for an entire generation. They know they cannot run on the border because they have allowed millions of unvetted individuals to pour into our country, bringing fentanyl and chaos with them. They know they cannot run on foreign policy because the world is on fire and our enemies no longer fear us. So, what is left for them? The only card they have left to play is that Trump is the boogeyman card, and they are playing it with a desperation that reeks of panic. Crockett's speech wasn't an attempt to govern. It was a desperate attempt to frame the narrative that Donald Trump and his allies are the source of all evil, specifically targeting the idea of corruption and lawlessness. They are terrified of Donald Trump not because he is a criminal, but because he is the only one standing in the way of their total takeover of the American system. They accuse him of grift, they accuse Kristi Noem of favoring cronies, all while they funnel billions of your taxpayer dollars into the pockets of green energy scams and foreign wars that have no end in sight. The audacity of Representative Crockett to sit there and talk about Republican corruption is staggering when you look at the swamp that Washington, D.C. has become under the uni-party establishment. They project their own sins onto the MAGA movement because they assume you aren't paying attention. They think if they scream loud enough about Kristi Noem or Donald Trump, you'll forget about the laptop, you'll forget about the 10% for the big guy, and you'll forget about the sweetheart deals given to donors in the omnibus spending bills that nobody reads. It is the classic magician's trick. Look at this hand waving over here, so you don't see what the other hand is stealing from your pocket. But the most dangerous part of Crockett's diatribe wasn't even the hypocrisy regarding corruption. It was the absolute fossage she spewed regarding crime and law enforcement. This is where the rubber meets the road, and this is where their lies actually get people hurt. Crockett tried to make the case that Republicans, specifically the MAGA wing, are the ones who have abandoned the police and that Republican-run states are the true cesspools of crime. This is a statistical lie that has been debunked 1,000 times, but they keep repeating and hoping it becomes truth through sheer repetition. Let's break down this red state murder problem myth that she and her colleagues love to cite. They take a state like Missouri or Louisiana, which are run by Republican governors, and they look at the crime rates and say, "See, Republican policies fail." But anyone with an ounce of common sense knows that cornfields and cow pastures aren't where the drive-by shootings are happening. The crime in these red states is hyper-concentrated in deep blue, Democrat-controlled cities like St. Louis, New Orleans, and Kansas City. These are cities that haven't had a Republican mayor in decades, cities where Soros-backed district attorneys refuse to prosecute criminals, and where liberal judges let violent offenders out on bail before the paperwork is even dry. Crockett knows this, but she counts on the low-information voter to just read the headline and not look at the map. She attacks the Republican philosophy of being tough on crime, calling it ineffective, yet she ignores the reality that for decades, American cities were safe precisely because we kept bad guys off the streets. Now, under the progressive philosophy she champions, we have smash-and-grab robberies destroying businesses, carjackings becoming a daily commute hazard, and innocent people being pushed onto subway tracks. And she has the gall to sit in a committee hearing and lecture Republicans about public safety? It is beyond out of touch. It is malicious. She claims that Republicans are cutting funding for law enforcement. Let's be very clear about who started the defund the police movement. It wasn't Donald Trump, and it wasn't the Freedom Caucus. It was the radical base of the Democrat Party, cheered on by the media, that spent the summer of 2020 burning down police precincts and calling our brave men and women in blue racists and murderers. They demoralized an entire generation of police officers, leading to record retirements and a recruitment crisis that we will be paying for years. Now that the polling shows Americans are terrified of crime, they are trying to flip the script and pretend they have been the party of law enforcement all along. It is gaslighting on an industrial scale. They broke the system, they demonized the protectors, they let the criminals run wild in the name of social justice, and now that the cities are crumbling, they want to blame the people who warned them this would happen. Crockett's rhetoric about mass incarceration being ineffective is the same soft-on-crime nonsense that has turned places like San Francisco and New York into third-world zones. They prioritize the feelings of the criminal over the safety of the victim. They talk about root causes and systemic issues while a grandmother gets knocked out for her purse. When Republicans talk about cutting spending, we are talking about cutting the bloat, the waste, and the weaponized DOJ that targets political opponents. We aren't talking about taking radios away from beat cops. We want to fund the police, but we also want a Department of Justice that hunts down actual criminals, not parents who speak up at school board meetings or pro-life activists praying on a sidewalk. That is the distinction they refuse to make. They equate the FBI raiding Mar-a-Lago with local law enforcement keeping your street safe. They are not the same thing. One is a Praetorian guard for the regime. The other is the thin blue line standing between civilization and anarchy. Crockett's attack on Kristi Noem is another example of their strategy to target any rising star in the Republican Party. Governor Noem stood tall during the pandemic, refused to lock down her state, and protected the freedoms of her people while blue states were welding doors shut and arresting people for going to church. The left hates her for it. They hate that she was successful. So, naturally, they have to invent a scandal. They have to find some way to drag her through the mud because they cannot defeat her ideas in the arena of public debate. It is personal destruction politics, plain and simple. And look at the timing. Why are they bringing this up now? Why is Jasmine Crockett going viral with this specific speech at this specific moment? Because the walls are closing in on their own narrative. The American people are waking up. We are seeing through the fog. We see the grocery prices, we see the gas prices, and we see the open border. They need a distraction. They need you to be angry at a Republican governor in South Dakota so you don't look at the senile man in the Oval Office who can barely find his way off a stage. They need you to be outraged about MAGA corruption so you don't ask questions about who is buying up American farmland or why our strategic petroleum reserve is empty. This hearing was not about justice. It was a campaign commercial funded by your tax dollars. It was an opportunity for the radical left to clip a segment for TikTok to fire up their base, a base that lives in a completely different reality than the rest of us. They live in a world where criminals are victims, where police are villains, where borders are racist, and where the government is your god. But out here in the real America, we know better. We know that a country without borders is not a country. We know that a society that tolerates crime will eventually collapse. And we know that politicians who get rich on a government salary are the problem, not the solution. Representative Crockett talks about conflicts of interest. Let's talk about the ultimate conflict of interest: politicians who hate the very country they are sworn to represent. When you listen to the language they use, they don't talk about uplifting America. They talk about tearing down its institutions. They call the Constitution broken, they call the Supreme Court illegitimate, and they call half the country extremists. This is not the language of governance. It is the language of revolution. They are trying to dismantle the foundations of this republic and replace it with a socialist utopia that exists only in their faculty lounge fantasies. The attack on the Trump administration within this hearing is particularly galling because it ignores the prosperity we had just a few short years ago. Remember when gas was $2 a gallon? Remember when inflation was non-existent? Remember when Putin didn't dare invade Ukraine and Hamas didn't dare attack Israel? That was the result of America First policies. That was the result of strength. Crockett and her ilk call that chaos because it disrupted their gravy train. They call it corruption because Trump didn't play by their swamp rules. He didn't need their money, and he didn't seek their approval, and that is the one sin Washington, D.C. will never forgive. They want you to believe that the chaos we are seeing today is somehow a hangover from the Trump years, rather than the direct result of Biden's executive orders and the Democrats' legislative agenda. It is a bold lie, but it is the only one they have. They have to convince you that your lying eyes are deceiving you. They have to convince you that the man who wants to drill, drill is the enemy of the economy, while the people shutting down pipelines are the saviors. They have to convince you that the man who wants to build the wall is the enemy of sovereignty, while the people flying illegal aliens into the interior of the country are the patriots. Jasmine Crockett is a symptom of a much larger disease in our body politic. It is the disease of performative outrage over practical solutions. She isn't there to fix the crime in her district. If she were, she'd be demanding more police, tougher sentencing, and an end to the catch-and-release policies that have turned our streets into a revolving door for felons. No, she is there to be an influencer. She is there to build her brand on the backs of the American taxpayer. And while she builds a brand, your neighborhood gets less safe, your dollar gets worth less, and your country slips further away from the values that made it the envy of the world. We have to stop treating these hearings as legitimate legislative business and start seeing them for what they are: propaganda sessions. They are creating sound bites for the evening news to smear conservatives. When she brings up specific contracts or specific allegations against Noem, realize that in the grand scheme of the trillions of dollars the federal government wastes, she is picking nits to create a headline. Meanwhile, The actual looting of the American Treasury continues unabated by the very people sitting next to her on that committee. This is the battle we are in. It is not just a battle of policies. It is a battle for the truth. They are trying to create a memory hole where the summer of 2020 never happened, where the border crisis is a Republican fabrication, and where the only corruption that exists is on the right side of the aisle. We cannot let them get away with it. We have to look at the facts, look at the history, and most importantly, look at our own lives. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Do you feel safer? Do you feel more free? The answer for the vast majority of Americans is a resounding no. And no amount of yelling from Jasmine Crockett can change that reality. Let's dig deeper into this concept of law and order that Representative Crockett seems to have suddenly discovered, because the hypocrisy here is not just laughable, it is dangerous. For years, we have listened to the left tell us that the criminal justice system is systematically racist, that prisons are modern-day slavery, and that the police are an occupying force in our communities. We saw them kneel in kente cloth in the Capitol Rotunda while cities burned. We saw the Vice President of the United States help raise bail money for rioters in Minnesota. But now, in a committee hearing meant to smear Donald Trump, suddenly they are the champions of the rule of law. Give me a break. The reality is that we are witnessing the weaponization of the American justice system, a concept we used to only see in banana republics and Soviet satellite states. When Crockett talks about Republicans defunding the police or abandoning the rule of law, she is relying on a very specific, dishonest legislative trick. Here is how it works in the swamp of Washington, D.C. The Democrats will write a 4,000-page bill. On page 50, they will put a small increase in funding for local police. But on the other 3,900 pages, they will pack in funding for gender studies in Pakistan, billions for the Green New Deal, amnesty for illegal aliens, and a new headquarters for the FBI so they can better spy on Catholic parents. When Republicans vote against that monstrosity of a bill because they refuse to bankrupt our grandchildren for a socialist wish list, Democrats like Jasmine Crockett run to the cameras and scream, "Look, they voted against the police." It is the oldest trick in the book. It is intellectual dishonesty at its finest. Republicans are not voting against the police. They are voting against the poison pill that the Democrats hid inside the apple. We want to fund the police, but we want a standalone bill. We want a bill that says, here is money for bulletproof vests, here is money for training, and here is money for more officers. But the Democrats will never give us that vote, because they know it would pass unanimously, and then they would lose their talking point. They hold public safety hostage to pass their radical agenda. And then they have the nerve to lecture us about responsible governance. The defunding that Republicans support is the defunding of the weaponized bureaucracy. We want to defund the 87,000 new IRS agents they hired to audit waiters and Uber drivers. We want to defund the censorship industrial complex that colludes with big tech to silence conservative voices. That is not law enforcement. That is regime enforcement. And there is a massive difference between the two. Crockett brought up the issue of federal grants and how red states rely on them, trying to paint Republican governors as hypocrites for taking federal money while criticizing the federal government. This shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how our federalist system was designed, or perhaps a deliberate attempt to subvert it. The money she is talking about is not the federal government's money. It is your money. It was taken from your paycheck in South Dakota, in Texas, in Florida, and sent to Washington. When a governor like Kristi Noem accepts a grant to help her state, she is merely clawing back a fraction of what her citizens have already paid. But let's look at the accusations against Kristi Noem specifically, because this is where the projection becomes almost pathological. They accuse her of nepotism or favoring specific contracts. Let's play that game. Let's look at the Biden family. We have hard evidence, bank records, and emails showing millions of dollars flowing from China, Russia, and Ukraine into shell companies owned by the Bidens. We have a son who had no experience in energy sitting on the board of a Ukrainian gas company. We have a brother selling access to the highest levels of government. And the Department of Justice, the same one Crockett claims we are undermining, let the statute of limitations expire on the most serious tax charges. They tried to give Hunter a sweetheart plea deal that would have granted him immunity for future crimes, a deal so corrupt that a judge threw it out in open court. You did not hear Jasmine Crockett give a passionate speech about that corruption. You did not hear her demand a committee hearing on the influence peddling of the big guy. No, for them, corruption is only a problem if the person accused has an R next to their name. If it's a Democrat, it's just business as usual. It's just how things work. This double standard is what is destroying faith in our institutions. Americans can handle bad news, and we can handle hard times, but what we cannot handle is a rigged game. And right now, the game is rigged against the average citizen and against the political opponents of the regime. Crockett's argument that jail doesn't work is perhaps the most insidious part of her testimony. She cites statistics trying to prove that incarceration rates don't correlate with safety. Go tell that to the mother in New York whose daughter was pushed in front of a train by a man with dozens of prior arrests. Go tell that to the business owner in San Francisco who has been robbed 10 times in a month because the district attorney refuses to prosecute shoplifting. The idea that separating violent sociopaths from civilized society is ineffective is an idea that could only come from an ivory tower academic or a politician who has armed security. In the real world, incapacitation works. If a criminal is behind bars, he cannot hurt you. It is a simple equation. But the modern left views the criminal as the victim of society. They believe that if someone carjacks you, it's because society failed them, because they didn't have enough after-school programs, or because of systemic racism. Therefore, punishing them is wrong. This philosophy has taken over the Democrat Party, and it is the direct cause of the crime wave we are seeing. They have decriminalized deviancy. They have lowered the standards of civilized behavior to the point where chaos is the new normal. And notice how they always pivot to white-collar crime or wage theft when you bring up violent crime. Crockett did exactly this. She tries to equate a business dispute or a regulatory violation with someone getting shot in the street. This is a deflection tactic. Yes, corporate fraud is bad, and it should be prosecuted. But corporate fraud doesn't make you afraid to walk to your car at night. Wage theft doesn't leave bodies in the morgue. They use these abstract concepts to distract from the visceral, bloody reality of the street crime that their policies have unleashed. They don't want to talk about the carjackings, the rapes, and the murders because they know their fingerprints are all over the policies that allowed them to happen. Furthermore, let's talk about the economic impact of this lawlessness, because it ties directly into the struggles of the working class that the Democrats claim to represent. When a CVS closes in a city because of rampant theft, who suffers? The elderly person who can't walk 10 blocks to the next pharmacy. When insurance rates skyrocket because of car thefts, who pays? The working mom who needs her car to get to her shift. Crime is a tax on the poor and the middle class. The rich can hire private security. They can move to gated communities. The policies that Jasmine Crockett advocates for hurt the very people she claims to fight for. It is a tragedy of epic proportions. The attack on MAGA throughout the hearing is also a calculated move to dehumanize half the country. Note the language: MAGA Republicans, extremists, cult. They use these words to signal to their base that we are not fellow Americans with a difference of opinion, but enemies to be destroyed. This is how they justify the lawfare. If you convince yourself that Donald Trump is literally Hitler, then anything you do to stop him is justified. You can cheat in the election, you can weaponize the FBI, you can twist the law, because the ends justify the means. This is the mindset of a totalitarian movement, not a democratic one. Crockett mocks the idea that the 2020 election had irregularities, or that the legal challenges brought by Republicans are valid. But look at what we know now. We know that the intelligence community lied about the Hunter Biden laptop to influence the election. We know that changes to election laws in swing states were made unconstitutionally by secretaries of state and judges, bypassing the legislatures. We know that Zuckerbucks, private money, was poured into government election offices to turn out the vote in Democrat strongholds. To question these things is not insurrection. It is the duty of a free citizen. But they want to criminalize dissent. They want to make it illegal to ask questions. The reason they are targeting Kristi Noem alongside Trump is to thin the bench. They know Trump is the heavyweight champion, but they are also looking at who comes next. They want to destroy anyone who has the potential to carry the torch of the America First movement. They see a strong, articulate female governor who defied the COVID narrative, and they are terrified. They need to paint her as corrupt now, so that if she ever ends up on a national ticket, the narrative is already set. It is a preemptive strike. This entire hearing, and the media coverage surrounding it, is a perfect example of the echo chamber in action. Crockett speaks, the liberal media clips it, the late-night hosts make jokes about it, and the New York Times writes an op-ed praising her bravery. Meanwhile, the substance of what she said, the lies, the distortions, the hypocrisy, goes unchecked by the so-called fact-checkers. If a Republican had made a speech filled with this many inaccuracies, they would be deplatformed. But because she is punching right, she is celebrated. We need to talk about the blue state exodus as well, because it is the ultimate refutation of Crockett's argument. If Democrat policies are so great, and if Republican states are such hellholes of crime and corruption, why are millions of people packing up U-Hauls and fleeing New York, California, and Illinois to move to Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and South Dakota? People vote with their feet. They are fleeing the high taxes, the high crime, and the stifling regulations of the blue utopias. They are moving to places where they can be free, where the police are funded, and where the government doesn't try to parent their children. Jasmine Crockett can scream at an empty committee room all she wants, but she cannot scream away the census data. The American people are rejecting what she is selling. The disconnect between the political class in DC and the reality on the ground has never been wider. You have people like Crockett who have never run a business, never met a payroll, and likely never had to worry about the price of eggs, lecturing us about economics and justice. They live in a bubble of privilege, funded by your tax dollars and special interest money. They look down on the people who grow their food, truck their goods, and fight their wars. They call us deplorables, garbage, or domestic terrorists. And then they wonder why we rally around Donald Trump. We rally around him not because he is perfect, but because he is the only one who throws a brick through the window of their clubhouse. He is the avatar of our frustration. When Crockett attacks the Make America Great Again slogan, ask yourself, what is wrong with wanting your country to be great? What is wrong with wanting safe streets, a secure border, a strong military, and a booming economy? Only someone who fundamentally despises the heritage of this nation would find those goals offensive. They want to manage decline. They want America to be just another member of the global community, subservient to international organizations and climate treaties. We want America to be the shining city on a hill. That is the fundamental conflict. And let's not forget the role of the unions in this corruption narrative. Crockett talks about corporate cronyism, but she is silent on the public sector unions that own the Democrat Party lock, stock, and barrel. The teachers' unions that kept schools closed for 2 years, hurting our poorest children the most, while funneling millions into Democrat campaign coffers. That is money laundering. That is corruption. They take mandatory dues from teachers, give it to politicians, and the politicians give them favorable contracts that protect bad teachers and keep schools failing. It is a cycle of failure that enriches the adults at the expense of the children. But you will never hear a word about that in a committee hearing run by Democrats. So, as we watch these clips of Jasmine Crockett circulate on social media, don't let them demoralize you. Let them motivate you. Understand that this is all they have left. They cannot run on their record, so they have to run on hatred. They have to manufacture scandals. They have to project their own failures onto us. It is the death rattle of a failed political establishment that knows its time is running out. They are loud, they are aggressive, and they are desperate. But the truth is on our side. The facts are on our side. And most importantly, the American spirit is on our side. They can try to gaslight us about crime statistics, they can try to redefine words, and they can try to rewrite history. But they cannot change the reality that we live in every day. We know what safe feels like, and this isn't it. We know what prosperity feels like, and this isn't it. And we know what leadership looks like, and what we are seeing from the Democrats in Congress is nothing but a pathetic masquerade. We have to keep our eyes on the prize, keep exposing their lies, and keep fighting for the country we love. Because if we don't, people like Jasmine Crockett will be the ones writing the future of America, and that is a future none of us can afford. Let's pivot back to the specific mechanics of this hearing, because the devil is always in the details, and the Democrats are masters of obscuring the details with emotional outbursts. Jasmine Crockett's performance was designed to keep you from looking at the scorecard. And the scorecard for the Biden-Harris administration is a sea of red ink and blood. One of the most glaring omissions in her lecture on crime and public safety was the absolute catastrophe unfolding at our southern border. You cannot have a serious conversation about crime in America in the year 2024 without talking about the open invitation the Democrats sent to the cartels. While Representative Crockett is nitpicking over state contracts in South Dakota, the Mexican drug cartels have seized operational control of our border. They are trafficking human beings. They are trafficking fentanyl that is killing over 100,000 Americans a year, and they are doing it with the tacit approval of an administration that refuses to enforce the law. This is the ultimate state-sponsored crime. The federal government, under Democrat leadership, has become the biggest partner in a human smuggling operation in world history. They fly illegal aliens into the interior of the country under the cover of night, dump them in communities that have no resources to handle them, and then call you a racist if you complain. Where is the outrage from Jasmine Crockett about the women and children being raped on the journey north? Where is her anger about the teenagers in her own district dying from fentanyl poisoning because a dealer sold them a fake Percocet? It is nowhere to be found. Why? Because acknowledging that reality would require admitting that Donald Trump was right. It would require admitting that walls work, that Remain in Mexico worked, and that sovereignty matters. They would rather let the country burn than give the bad orange man a win. That is the depth of their hatred. It is a hatred that supersedes their duty to protect the American people. And let's look at the financial aspect of this border crisis, since Crockett pretends to care so much about the misuse of taxpayer funds. We are spending billions of dollars a year to house, feed, and provide legal services to people who broke our laws to get here. We are putting illegal aliens in luxury hotels in New York City, while our own homeless veterans are sleeping on the shivering concrete. We are giving them prepaid debit cards while American families are putting groceries back on the shelf because they can't afford the bill. This is the definition of America Last. It is a looting of the American treasury to import a new voter class. Crockett's attack on Kristi Noem is also a proxy war against the concept of rural America itself. The coastal elites who run the Democrat Party look at places like South Dakota, Wyoming, and Nebraska with utter contempt. They call it flyover country. They think we are backward, uneducated, and clinging to our guns and religion. When they see a governor like Noem defending the agricultural way of life, defending the Second Amendment, and defending the rights of the unborn, it triggers a visceral reaction in them. They want to crush that spirit. They want to homogenize America into one giant, concrete, progressive urban sprawl where everyone thinks alike, votes alike, and depends on the government for their daily bread. They pick on Noem's utilization of state aircraft or security details. Please, let's talk about the carbon footprint of the climate czar John Kerry flying private jets all over the world to tell you to stop driving your pickup truck. Let's talk about Nancy Pelosi's military jet travel. Let's talk about the sheer volume of taxpayer money wasted on diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants in the Pentagon. The hypocrisy is so thick you can choke on it. They weaponize the ethics rules against Republicans, while they themselves live like royalty on the public dime. It is a two-tiered system of justice and a two-tiered system of accountability. This hearing also touched on the idea of crime rates in red states versus blue states, a favorite talking point of the left-wing media apparatus. They love to throw out the statistic that murder rates are higher in Trump states. But as we touched on before, this is a statistical lie. But let's go deeper. Let's look at who is actually committing the crimes and who is prosecuting, or failing to prosecute, them. In those red states, the crime is driven almost exclusively by blue islands of dysfunction. Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee. These are cities that have been under Democrat control for generations. The poverty, the broken families, the failing schools, these are the legacy of the Great Society programs that destroyed the black family and replaced the father with a government check. Jasmine Crockett doesn't want to talk about that. She doesn't want to talk about the cultural rot that her party has incentivized. She wants to blame the gun. She wants to blame the system. She wants to blame white supremacy. But she will never look in the mirror and ask, why is it that after 50 years of Democrat rule, the communities we claim to help are worse off than ever? The answer is painful. The answer is that the Democrat Party needs a permanent underclass to stay in power. They need people to be dependent, angry, and afraid. If they actually fix the problems in the inner cities, they would lose their most reliable voting bloc. So they attack the Republican solution, which is simple: opportunity, safety, and family. We believe that the best anti-poverty program is a job. We believe that the best crime prevention is a father in the home. And we believe that the government should get out of the way and let people build their lives. Crockett calls this neglect. We call it freedom. And that is the fundamental divide. They view the state as the mother and the father. We view the state as a necessary evil that should be kept small and on a tight leash. Let's also address the lawfare strategy that this hearing is a part of. The Democrats know that they are losing the argument on the merits. They see the polls. They see Trump leading in the swing states. They see him making historic gains with Hispanic and black voters, specifically black men who are tired of being pandered to by people like Crockett while their economic prospects dwindle. The Democrats are terrified of a realignment. So, the strategy is to criminalize the opposition. If they can get a conviction in New York, or Georgia, or D.C., They think they can label Trump a felon and steal the election. But here is what they don't understand about the MAGA movement. The more they attack him, the stronger he gets. Every indictment is a badge of honor. Every mugshot is a campaign poster. Because the American people see exactly what is happening. They see a man willing to stand in the breach and take the arrows for them. When Trump says, "They're not after me, they're after you, I'm just in the way," it resonates because it is true. If they can do this to a billionaire former president, imagine what they can do to you. Imagine what the IRS can do to your small business. Imagine what the FBI can do to your church. Crockett's rhetoric about MAGA extremism is designed to justify this persecution. By painting Republicans as a danger to democracy, they give themselves permission to suspend the rules of democracy. They took Trump off the ballot in Colorado and Maine before the Supreme Court stepped in the name of saving democracy. Think about the Orwellian logic of that. We have to stop you from voting for the candidate of your choice in order to protect your right to vote. It is insanity. And Jasmine Crockett is one of the chief architects of this narrative in the House. We also have to talk about the media's role in amplifying this specific hearing. You didn't just stumble upon this clip of Jasmine Crockett. It was fed to you by the algorithm. The big tech oligarchs work hand in glove with the Democrat establishment. They suppress conservative content, shadow ban our creators, and demonetize our channels, while pushing Yas Queen moments like Crockett's rant to the top of your feed. They want you to think that her view is the majority view. They want to manufacture a consensus that doesn't exist. But look at the comment section on any uncensored platform. Look at the ratio. The people aren't buying it. We see through the performative anger. We see a politician who is more interested in getting a contract as a contributor on MSNBC than in solving the problems of her district. We see the fake eyelashes and the scripted lines, and we realize that Washington, D.C. has become Hollywood for ugly people. It is all show business. And the ticket price is your liberty. Let's return to the specific accusation of corruption regarding the Trump family versus the Biden family. Crockett brings up the emoluments clause, a dusty legal theory that went nowhere. Meanwhile, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump worked for free. Donald Trump donated his salary every single quarter. Contrast that with the Bidens. Joe Biden has been in public office for 50 years on a government salary, yet somehow owns multiple mansions in Delaware. How does the math work on that? It doesn't, unless you factor in the brand. The Biden brand. Selling influence. And what about the corruption of the intelligence agencies? We now know that the CIA and the FBI were actively involved in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story. We know that 51 former intelligence officials signed a letter claiming it was Russian disinformation when they knew, or should have known, that it was authentic. That is election interference. That is a coup. And not a single one of those people has been held accountable. Jasmine Crockett doesn't call for hearings on that. She doesn't demand to know why the FBI sat on evidence. Her silence is complicity. The focus on Kristi Noem is also a distraction from the utter failure of female leadership in the Democrat Party. Look at Kamala Harris. She was given one job: fix the border. She went to Central America, gave a speech about root causes, and then disappeared. She is arguably the most ineffective vice president in modern history. Look at Janet Yellen at the Treasury, telling us inflation was transitory while the printing presses ran 24/7. Look at Jennifer Granholm at Energy, laughing when asked about gas prices. The Democrats have elevated people based on identity politics rather than competence, and the country is paying the price. Noem, on the other hand, runs a state that works. She balances a budget. She keeps the lights on. That competence is a threat to the narrative that diversity is our strength, when in reality, merit should be our only metric. When Crockett talks about the rule of law, remember that her party supports district attorneys like Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis, and George Gascon. These are people who ran on platforms of not enforcing the law. Fani Willis is currently embroiled in her own scandal involving misuse of funds and an improper relationship with a prosecutor she hired, a scandal that makes the accusations against Noem look like jaywalking. Yet, Crockett defends her. She defends the prosecutors who are tearing this country apart because they are on her team. It is tribalism disguised as justice. The American people are tired of the double talk. We are tired of being told that the economy is great when we can't afford a home. We are tired of being told that the border is secure when we see the videos of thousands crossing daily. And we are tired of being told that Republicans are the problem when the Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the administrative state. The buck stops with the people in charge. And right now, the people in charge are driving the bus off a cliff. Crockett's speech is a sign of weakness, not strength. It is the lashing out of a political movement that has no answers. They can't fix inflation, they can't fix the border, and they can't fix the world stage. So they scream. They call names. They investigate. They indict. But they cannot govern. And come November, the American people are going to issue a verdict that is going to shock the system. We are heading toward a reckoning. A choice between two very different visions of America. One vision, the one Crockett represents, is a vision of decline, division, and dependence. A vision where the government controls your healthcare, your car, your stove, and your speech. A vision where criminals are coddled and citizens are suspected. The other vision, the MAGA vision, is one of restoration. Restoring our borders, restoring our manufacturing base, restoring our military strength, and restoring the basic sanity that says boys are boys and girls are girls. This hearing was just a skirmish in that larger war. And while they may control the microphone in that committee room, they do not control the hearts and minds of the American people. We are the silent majority, and we are getting louder every day. We are the parents at the school board meetings. We are the workers refusing the mandates. We are the voters who are going to turn the tide. So let Jasmine Crockett have her viral moment. Let the liberal media clap like seals. Because while they are celebrating their dunk on Republicans, we are organizing. We are registering voters. We are waking up our neighbors. The pendulum is swinging back, and when it hits, it is going to hit hard. The era of the woke left bullying the rest of us is coming to an end. The grown-ups are coming back to the room. And regarding the specific policy points she tried to dismantle, like qualified immunity for police officers, let's be clear. If you end qualified immunity, you end policing. Period. No sane person will take a job where a split-second decision made under fire can lead to them losing their house and their life savings because a criminal decided to resist arrest. The Democrats know this. They want to end policing as we know it and replace it with community violence interrupters and social workers. Good luck calling a social worker when someone is breaking into your house at 3 a.m. It is a suicidal policy proposal, and yet, it is mainstream thought in the Democrat Party today. Crockett represents the Burn It Down caucus. They see America as fundamentally flawed, founded in sin, and irredeemable. They don't want to improve America. They want to transform it into something unrecognizable. We, on the other hand, love this country. We know we have flaws, but we know that our Constitution is the greatest charter of liberty ever written. We want to preserve it. That is the difference. One side wants to destroy, the other wants to protect. In the next part of this analysis, we need to look at the road ahead. What happens if these people retain power? What happens if the agenda Jasmine Crockett laid out becomes the law of the land permanently? We need to paint the picture of that dystopian future so that every American understands exactly what is at stake. It isn't just about a committee hearing. It is about the survival of the American Republic. If the agenda that Jasmine Crockett and her handlers are pushing becomes the permanent law of the land, we are looking at the end of the American experiment as we know it. We are not just talking about higher taxes or more regulations. We are talking about a fundamental restructuring of society where the individual is nothing and the state is everything. They want to replace the American dream with a managed nightmare of compliance, surveillance, and dependence. Imagine a future where the soft-on-crime policies of the squad are federalized. Imagine a national ban on cash bail, mandated by Washington, D.C., forcing every small town in America to adopt the failed policies of Los Angeles and Chicago. You won't be able to move to a safe neighborhood because there won't be any safe neighborhoods left. The Section 8 housing mandates that the Obama administration started and the Biden administration is accelerating are designed to abolish the suburbs. They want to forcibly integrate high-density, low-income housing into your quiet cul-de-sac to diversify your zip code. They call it equity. We call it the deliberate destruction of property values and community cohesion. Crockett's dismissal of the crime wave is a preview of how they will handle all future crises. Denial. When the power grid goes down because they shut down all the coal plants and forced everyone onto unreliable wind and solar, they will tell you it's not happening, or they will blame climate change instead of their own disastrous policies. They are already doing it. They tell you the economy is booming while credit card debt hits an all-time high. In their world, the truth is whatever the party says it is today. And if you disagree, you are spreading misinformation. Let's talk about that word, misinformation. The Democrats in Congress, including Crockett, are obsessed with regulating speech. They look at the First Amendment not as a God-given right, but as a loophole that needs to be closed. They believe that the government should have the power to decide what is true and what is false. During the hearing, the underlying subtext of her attack on MAGA is that our ideas are too dangerous to be allowed in the public square. They want to label conservative thought as hate speech. Once they do that, they can shut down our websites, freeze our bank accounts, and silence us forever. It is the Chinese social credit system wrapped in the American flag. And speaking of bank accounts, we have to look at where the corruption narrative leads. If they can accuse a governor of corruption for using state resources, what will they do to you? We are moving toward a central bank digital currency, CBDC. The Biden administration is actively exploring it. If they implement a digital dollar, they will have total control over your life. They can turn off your ability to buy gas if you've driven too much that month. They can stop you from buying ammunition. They can freeze your funds if you donate to the wrong political candidate. This isn't science fiction. It is the logical conclusion of the control freak ideology that Jasmine Crockett represents. They want to track every penny you spend to ensure you are complying with their green agenda and their social justice dogmas. The hypocrisy of Crockett lecturing about financial stewardship is laughable when you look at the Green New Deal scams. We are talking about trillions of dollars being printed out of thin air to subsidize electric vehicle battery plants owned by the Chinese Communist Party. They are forcing you to buy electric cars that don't work in the cold, that you can't afford, and that destroy the auto industry in Michigan, all to appease a climate cult that believes the world is ending in 10 years. That is the real corruption. It is the transfer of wealth from the working class to the green energy elites. And unlike the peanuts they are accusing Kristi Noem of misusing, this is theft on a planetary scale. Furthermore, We need to address the systemic racism lie that underpinned Crockett's entire testimony. She operates from the premise that the American justice system is inherently racist. This is a poisonous lie that teaches young minority children that they are victims who cannot succeed without government help, and it teaches young white children that they are oppressors born with original sin. It destroys race relations. It creates resentment where there should be unity. The Democrats need racism. If racism disappeared tomorrow, the Democrat Party would cease to exist. They have to keep the wound open. They have to keep picking at the scab. They are the arsonists complaining about the fire. When Republicans talk about law and order, we are talking about blind justice. Lady Justice wears a blindfold for a reason. It shouldn't matter if you are black, white, rich, or poor. If you do the crime, you do the time. But the modern left wants to peek under the blindfold. They want equity in sentencing, which means letting criminals go free to balance the racial statistics of the prison population. That is not justice. That is social engineering. And the victims of this social engineering are primarily the minority communities they claim to serve. The elderly black woman in the inner city wants more police, not fewer. She wants the drug dealers off her corner. Jasmine Crockett ignores her voice to pander to the white liberals in the university towns who think "abolish the police" is a trendy slogan. The attack on the Trump administration's record during this hearing was also an attempt to rewrite the history of our foreign policy. Under Trump, we had peace through strength. We didn't start any new wars. We crushed ISIS. We brought our troops home. Now, under the Biden-Harris administration, the world is on fire. We are funding a proxy war in Ukraine with no defined endgame and no accounting for the money. We surrendered Afghanistan in the most humiliating fashion imaginable, leaving billions of dollars of equipment to terrorists. And yet, Crockett has the nerve to talk about competence. The projection is astronomical. They are driving us toward World War III while lecturing us about mean tweets. Let's focus on the two-tiered justice system again, because this is the mechanism they use to stay in power. If you are a Democrat and you destroy evidence, like Hillary Clinton's emails, nothing happens. If you lie to the FISA court to spy on a presidential campaign, nothing happens. If you riot and burn down federal courthouses in Portland, the charges are dropped. But if you are a grandmother who walked through the open doors of the Capitol on January 6th, the FBI kicks down your door and throws you in solitary confinement. This is not the rule of law. It is political persecution. Jasmine Crockett defends this system. She wants to expand it. She wants to use the power of the state to crush dissent. The hearing was also a distraction from the mental decline of the commander-in-chief. Every day we see new videos of Joe Biden struggling to speak, struggling to walk, and getting lost on stage. It is a national security crisis. Our enemies see it. China sees it. Russia sees it. Iran sees it. That is why they are on the march. They know there is a vacuum of leadership in the White House. But the Democrats in Congress, the media, and the cabinet are engaged in a massive cover-up. They are gaslighting the American people into believing that the emperor has clothes. And when Republicans point it out, they call us ageist or disrespectful. It isn't disrespect, it's reality. And it is dangerous. Crockett's grandstanding is intended to hide the fact that the Democrat coalition is fracturing. They are losing the working class. The Teamsters, the auto workers, the pipefitters, these are people who used to be reliable Democrats. But they have watched the Democrat Party become the party of transgender ideology, open borders, and climate hysteria. They look at Jasmine Crockett and they don't see themselves. They see an elite who looks down on them. Trump speaks to these people. He speaks to the forgotten men and women of America. And that is why the establishment is so terrified. They are losing their grip on power, and they are lashing out like a wounded animal. We also have to consider the role of the education system in all of this. The reason a speech like Crockett's resonates with some young people is because they have been indoctrinated for years in our government schools. They haven't been taught civics, they've been taught activism. They haven't been taught critical thinking, they've been taught critical race theory. They don't know who James Madison is, but they know every pronoun. Republicans have been asleep at the wheel on education for too long. We let the unions take over, and now we are producing a generation that hates their own country. We have to take back the school boards. We have to implement school choice. We have to break the monopoly of the teachers' unions if we want to save this republic. The corruption Crockett speaks of is a projection of the moral rot within her own party. They support the chemical castration of children in the name of gender-affirming care. They support abortion up until the moment of birth, and in some cases, after. They support keeping secrets from parents. This is a war on the family. The family is the building block of society. If you destroy the family, the state becomes the only authority. That is the goal. Every policy they push, from the marriage penalty in the tax code to the welfare state that disincentivizes marriage, is designed to break the bond between parent and child, and husband and wife. When you look at the red state economies that Crockett attacks, you see growth. You see innovation. You see Elon Musk moving Tesla to Texas. You see Ken Griffin moving Citadel to Florida. Capital goes where it is treated well. People go where they can breathe free. The blue states are dying on the vine, choked by taxes and regulations. Crockett can spin the numbers however she wants, but she cannot explain why U-Haul runs out of trucks leaving California every single year. The market doesn't lie. This hearing is a call to arms for every conservative. We cannot be the silent majority anymore. We have to be the vocal majority. We have to be as relentless as they are. They have the media. They have the universities. They have the bureaucracy. But we have the people. We have the truth. And we have the Constitution. But those things only matter if we fight for them. We have to get involved in the primaries. We have to support the America First candidates who aren't afraid to flip over the tables. We don't need any more Mitt Romneys or Liz Cheneys. We need fighters. The strategy of the left is overwhelm the system. Cloward Piven strategy. Overload the welfare rolls, overload the border, overload the courts, and cause a collapse that allows them to rebuild from the ashes. That is what we are watching in real time. The border crisis isn't incompetence. It is a strategy. The spending isn't an accident. It is a strategy. They are trying to bankrupt the nation to force a socialist reset. Jasmine Crockett is a foot soldier in this revolution. She may not even realize the full scope of what she is doing, but she is playing her part perfectly. And let's not forget the globalist angle. The World Economic Forum, the WHO, the UN, these entities are working in lockstep with the Biden administration. They want to surrender our sovereignty to unelected bureaucrats in Geneva and Davos. They want a global pandemic treaty that would give the WHO power over American healthcare decisions. They want 15-minute cities where your movement is restricted. The MAGA movement is the only thing standing in the way of this globalist takeover. Donald Trump told them no. He pulled us out of the Paris Accord. He pulled funding from the WHO. That is why they hate him. He put America first, and to the globalists, that is the ultimate sin. Crockett's speech is merely a symptom of a political party that has abandoned the American people in favor of a globalist, elitist agenda. They care more about the border of Ukraine than the border of Texas. They care more about the feelings of a radical activist than the safety of a suburban mom. They care more about their standing at a cocktail party in DC than the price of milk in Des Moines. This disconnect is unsustainable. Something has to give. As we move toward the next election, the lies are going to get bigger. The distractions are going to get louder. They will probably trot out another pandemic or another insurrection narrative. They will do anything to avoid running on their record. We have to be ready. We have to be inoculated against their propaganda. When you see a clip like this, don't get angry, get active. Share the truth. Talk to your neighbors. Bypass the gatekeepers of the media. The deep state is real. The administrative state is real. It is a fourth branch of government that was never authorized by the Constitution. It is the thousands of unelected bureaucrats who write the rules that have the force of law, who can't be fired, and who overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Trump tried to drain the swamp with Schedule F, which would have made these bureaucrats fireable. Biden rescinded it on day one. Why? Because the swamp protects its own. They know that if the people ever regain control of the government, the gravy train is over. So when Jasmine Crockett screams about Republicans breaking the law, remember who she works for. She works for the system that is bankrupting you. She works for the system that spies on you. She works for the system that hates you. Her anger is theatrical, but the threat she represents is very real. We are in the fight of our lives. It is a fight between freedom and tyranny, between sovereignty and submission, between greatness and decline. In the final section of this breakdown, I want to talk about the path to victory. It's not enough to just complain about what they are doing. We need a battle plan. We need to talk about how we dismantle the corrupt infrastructure they have built, how we restore faith in our justice system, and how we ensure that the next time we win, we actually govern like it. We need to explore the retribution that Trump talks about, not as revenge, but as the restoration of justice. Because without accountability, there is no republic. If the agenda that Jasmine Crockett and her handlers are pushing becomes the permanent law of the land, we are looking at the end of the American experiment as we know it. We are not just talking about higher taxes or more regulations. We are talking about a fundamental restructuring of society where the individual is nothing and the state is everything. They want to replace the American dream with a managed nightmare of compliance, surveillance, and dependence. Imagine a future where the soft-on-crime policies of the squad are federalized. Imagine a national ban on cash bail, mandated by Washington, D.C., forcing every small town in America to adopt the failed policies of Los Angeles and Chicago. You won't be able to move to a safe neighborhood because there won't be any safe neighborhoods left. The Section 8 housing mandates that the Obama administration started and the Biden administration is accelerating are designed to abolish the suburbs. They want to forcibly integrate high-density, low-income housing into your quiet cul-de-sac to diversify your zip code. They call it equity. We call it the deliberate destruction of property values and community cohesion. Crockett's dismissal of the crime wave is a preview of how they will handle all future crises. Denial. When the power grid goes down because they shut down all the coal plants and forced everyone onto unreliable wind and solar, they will tell you it's not happening, or they will blame climate change instead of their own disastrous policies. They are already doing it. They tell you the economy is booming while credit card debt hits an all-time high. In their world, the truth is whatever the party says it is today. And if you disagree, you are spreading misinformation. Let's talk about that word, misinformation. The Democrats in Congress, including Crockett, are obsessed with regulating speech. They look at the First Amendment not as a God-given right, but as a loophole that needs to be closed. They believe that the government should have the power to decide what is true and what is false. During the hearing, the underlying subtext of her attack on MAGA is that our ideas are too dangerous to be allowed in the public square. They want to label conservative thought as hate speech. Once they do that, they can shut down our websites, freeze our bank accounts, and silence us forever. It is the Chinese social credit system wrapped in the American flag. And speaking of bank accounts, we have to look at where the corruption narrative leads. If they can accuse a governor of corruption for using state resources, what will they do to you? We are moving toward a central bank digital currency, CBDC. The Biden administration is actively exploring it. If they implement a digital dollar, they will have total control over your life. They can turn off your ability to buy gas if you've driven too much that month. They can stop you from buying ammunition. They can freeze your funds if you donate to the wrong political candidate. This isn't science fiction. It is the logical conclusion of the control freak ideology that Jasmine Crockett represents. They want to track every penny you spend to ensure you are complying with their green agenda and their social justice dogmas. The hypocrisy of Crockett lecturing about financial stewardship is laughable when you look at the Green New Deal scams. We are talking about trillions of dollars being printed out of thin air to subsidize electric vehicle battery plants owned by the Chinese Communist Party. They are forcing you to buy electric cars that don't work in the cold, that you can't afford, and that destroy the auto industry in Michigan, all to appease a climate cult that believes the world is ending in 10 years. That is the real corruption. It is the transfer of wealth from the working class to the green energy elites. And unlike the peanuts they are accusing Kristi Noem of misusing, this is theft on a planetary scale. Furthermore, we need to address the systemic racism lie that underpinned Crockett's entire testimony. She operates from the premise that the American justice system is inherently racist. This is a poisonous lie that teaches young minority children that they are victims who cannot succeed without government help, and it teaches young white children that they are oppressors born with original sin. It destroys race relations. It creates resentment where there should be unity. The Democrats need racism. If racism disappeared tomorrow, the Democrat Party would cease to exist. They have to keep the wound open. They have to keep picking at the scab. They are the arsonists complaining about the fire. When Republicans talk about law and order, we are talking about blind justice. Lady Justice wears a blindfold for a reason. It shouldn't matter if you are black, white, rich, or poor. If you do the crime, you do the time. But the modern left wants to peek under the blindfold. They want equity in sentencing, which means letting criminals go free to balance the racial statistics of the prison population. That is not justice. That is social engineering. And the victims of this social engineering are primarily the minority communities they claim to serve. The elderly black woman in the inner city wants more police, not fewer. She wants the drug dealers off her corner. Jasmine Crockett ignores her voice to pander to the white liberals in the university towns who think "abolish the police" is a trendy slogan. The attack on the Trump administration's record during this hearing was also an attempt to rewrite the history of our foreign policy. Under Trump, we had peace through strength. We didn't start any new wars. We crushed ISIS. We brought our troops home. Now, under the Biden-Harris administration, the world is on fire. We are funding a proxy war in Ukraine with no defined endgame and no accounting for the money. We surrendered Afghanistan in the most humiliating fashion imaginable, leaving billions of dollars of equipment to terrorists. And yet, Crockett has the nerve to talk about competence. The projection is astronomical. They are driving us toward World War III while lecturing us about mean tweets. Let's focus on the two-tiered justice system again. because this is the mechanism they use to stay in power. If you are a Democrat and you destroy evidence, like Hillary Clinton's emails, nothing happens. If you lie to the FISA court to spy on a presidential campaign, nothing happens. If you riot and burn down federal courthouses in Portland, the charges are dropped. But if you are a grandmother who walked through the open doors of the Capitol on January 6th, the FBI kicks down your door and throws you in solitary confinement. This is not the rule of law. It is political persecution. Jasmine Crockett defends this system. She wants to expand it. She wants to use the power of the state to crush dissent. The hearing was also a distraction from the mental decline of the commander-in-chief. Every day we see new videos of Joe Biden struggling to speak, struggling to walk, and getting lost on stage. It is a national security crisis. Our enemies see it. China sees it. Russia sees it. Iran sees it. That is why they are on the march. They know there is a vacuum of leadership in the White House. But the Democrats in Congress, the media, and the cabinet are engaged in a massive cover-up. They are gaslighting the American people into believing that the emperor has clothes. And when Republicans point it out, they call us ageist or disrespectful. It isn't disrespect, it's reality. And it is dangerous. Crockett's grandstanding is intended to hide the fact that the Democrat coalition is fracturing. They are losing the working class. The Teamsters, the auto workers, the pipefitters, these are people who used to be reliable Democrats. But they have watched the Democrat Party become the party of transgender ideology, open borders, and climate hysteria. They look at Jasmine Crockett and they don't see themselves. They see an elite who looks down on them. Trump speaks to these people. He speaks to the forgotten men and women of America. And that is why the establishment is so terrified. They are losing their grip on power, and they are lashing out like a wounded animal. We also have to consider the role of the education system in all of this. The reason a speech like Crockett's resonates with some young people is because they have been indoctrinated for years in our government schools. They haven't been taught civics, they've been taught activism. They haven't been taught critical thinking, they've been taught critical race theory. They don't know who James Madison is, but they know every pronoun. Republicans have been asleep at the wheel on education for too long. We let the unions take over, and now we are producing a generation that hates their own country. We have to take back the school boards. We have to implement school choice. We have to break the monopoly of the teachers' unions if we want to save this republic. The corruption Crockett speaks of is a projection of the moral rot within her own party. They support the chemical castration of children in the name of gender-affirming care. They support abortion up until the moment of birth, and in some cases, after. They support keeping secrets from parents. This is a war on the family. The family is the building block of society. If you destroy the family, the state becomes the only authority. That is the goal. Every policy they push, from the marriage penalty in the tax code to the welfare state that disincentivizes marriage, is designed to break the bond between parent and child, and husband and wife. When you look at the red state economies that Crockett attacks, you see growth. You see innovation. You see Elon Musk moving Tesla to Texas. You see Ken Griffin moving Citadel to Florida. Capital goes where it is treated well. People go where they can breathe free. The blue states are dying on the vine, choked by taxes and regulations. Crockett can spin the numbers however she wants, but she cannot explain why U-Haul runs out of trucks leaving California every single year. The market doesn't lie. This hearing is a call to arms for every conservative. We cannot be the silent majority anymore. We have to be the vocal majority. We have to be as relentless as they are. They have the media. They have the universities. They have the bureaucracy. But we have the people. We have the truth. And we have the Constitution. But those things only matter if we fight for them. We have to get involved in the primaries. We have to support the America First candidates who aren't afraid to flip over the tables. We don't need any more Mitt Romneys or Liz Cheneys. We need fighters. The strategy of the left is overwhelm the system. Cloward Piven strategy. Overload the welfare rolls, overload the border, overload the courts, and cause a collapse that allows them to rebuild from the ashes. That is what we are watching in real time. The border crisis isn't incompetence. It is a strategy. The spending isn't an accident. It is a strategy. They are trying to bankrupt the nation to force a socialist reset. Jasmine Crockett is a foot soldier in this revolution. She may not even realize the full scope of what she is doing, but she is playing her part perfectly. And let's not forget the globalist angle. The World Economic Forum, the WHO, the UN, these entities are working in lockstep with the Biden administration. They want to surrender our sovereignty to unelected bureaucrats in Geneva and Davos. They want a global pandemic treaty that would give the WHO power over American healthcare decisions. They want 15-minute cities where your movement is restricted. The MAGA movement is the only thing standing in the way of this globalist takeover. Donald Trump told them no. He pulled us out of the Paris Accord. He pulled funding from the WHO. That is why they hate him. He put America first, and to the globalists, that is the ultimate sin. Crockett's speech is merely a symptom of a political party that has abandoned the American people in favor of a globalist, elitist agenda. They care more about the border of Ukraine than the border of Texas. They care more about the feelings of a radical activist than the safety of a suburban mom. They care more about their standing at a cocktail party in D.C. than the price of milk in Des Moines. This disconnect is unsustainable. Something has to give. As we move toward the next election, the lies are going to get bigger. The distractions are going to get louder. They will probably trot out another pandemic or another insurrection narrative. They will do anything to avoid running on their record. We have to be ready. We have to be inoculated against their propaganda. When you see a clip like this, don't get angry, get active. Share the truth. Talk to your neighbors. Bypass the gatekeepers of the media. The deep state is real. The administrative state is real. It is a fourth branch of government that was never authorized by the Constitution. It is the thousands of unelected bureaucrats who write the rules that have the force of law, who can't be fired, and who overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Trump tried to drain the swamp with Schedule F, which would have made these bureaucrats fireable. Biden rescinded it on day one. Why? Because the swamp protects its own. They know that if the people ever regain control of the government, the gravy train is over. So when Jasmine Crockett screams about Republicans breaking the law, remember who she works for. She works for the system that is bankrupting you. She works for the system that spies on you. She works for the system that hates you. Her anger is theatrical, but the threat she represents is very real. We are in the fight of our lives. It is a fight between freedom and tyranny, between sovereignty and submission, between greatness and decline. We need to have a serious conversation about what retribution really means in the context of the MAGA movement. The media, clutching their pearls, wants you to believe that Donald Trump and his supporters are out for blood, that we want to jail our opponents simply because we don't like them. That is the projection of the left, because that is exactly what they are doing to us right now. Our version of retribution is actually far more terrifying to them because it is far more effective. We simply want the law to be applied equally. We want a restoration of justice. If applying the law equally results in Democrats going to jail for the crimes they have committed, that isn't revenge. That is justice finally arriving at the station. When we talk about draining the swamp, we aren't talking about a catchy slogan anymore. We are talking about a survival mechanism for the Republic. The first step in this battle plan is the implementation of Schedule F immediately upon taking office. This executive order, which Trump signed and Biden revoked, strips the employment protections from tens of thousands of policy-making bureaucrats in Washington. These are the people who sabotage the first term, the ones who leak to the press, slow walk orders, and think they know better than the president you elected. They need to be fired. Not just a few of them, but whole departments of them. You cannot change Washington if the same people are running the machinery. We need to shatter the geographic bubble of the deep state. Why does the Department of Agriculture need to be in Washington, D.C.? Move it to Iowa. Why does the Department of Interior need to be in the swamp? Move it to Utah. Why does the FBI need a massive new headquarters in the Beltway? Break it up and scatter it to Kansas, Oklahoma, and the Dakotas. Force these bureaucrats to live among the people they regulate. Force them to look their neighbors in the eye. You will see a lot fewer insane regulations when the people writing them have to live in the real world instead of the wealthy suburbs of Northern Virginia. And speaking of the FBI, we have to address the hard truth. The agency, as it currently stands, is broken beyond repair. It has become a domestic intelligence agency dedicated to protecting the regime. We need a church-style committee investigation to expose every single abuse of power from the last decade, from Crossfire Hurricane to the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop. We need to declassify everything. Put it all online. Let the American people see the text messages, the emails, and the memos. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if we find that laws were broken, and we know they were, there must be prosecutions. No more looking forward, not backward. Election integrity is the hill we must be willing to die on. Without fair elections, we are just a banana republic with better Wi-Fi. The Democrats fight tooth and nail against voter ID because they know it stops them from cheating. It is that simple. We need a national standard, paper ballots, same-day voting, and mandatory voter ID. No more ballot harvesting, no more drop boxes in the middle of the night, and no more counting votes for weeks until the Democrat candidate magically pulls ahead. If France can count their votes in one night, so can we. The fact that we tolerate this chaos is a choice, and it is a choice we must stop making. We also have to cut off the money that fuels the left-wing machine. We need to stop subsidizing our own destruction. Why are we giving billions in tax breaks to universities that hate America? Why are we giving grants to non-profits that help illegal aliens cross the border? We need to ruthlessly defund these entities. Use the power of the purse. If a university discriminates against conservatives or pushes anti-American hatred, they shouldn't get a dime of federal research money. Tax their endowments. Hit them where it hurts, their bank accounts. This brings us to the culture war, specifically in our military. The next commander-in-chief must purge the woke generals who have prioritized diversity training over warfighting capability. We need a military that is lethal, not socially conscious. Our enemies are laughing at us while we debate pronouns in the Navy. We need to return to a meritocracy where the only thing that matters is your ability to do the job. If you can't meet the physical standards, you don't get in. Period. The social experimentation in the Pentagon ends on day one. The border crisis requires more than just a wall. It requires a mass deportation operation the likes of which we haven't seen since the Eisenhower administration. Eisenhower didn't hate immigrants. He loved the rule of law. We have to send a message to the world that if you break into our house, you don't get to sleep on the couch, you get sent back. It will be hard. The media will scream. They will show crying families on CNN 24/7. We have to have the stomach to ignore them. National suicide is not compassion. We have an obligation to our own citizens first. Economically, we must return to the nationalism that built this country. Tariffs are not a dirty word. They are a tool to protect American workers from slave labor in China. We need to decouple our economy from our geopolitical enemies. Why do we allow China to buy our farmland? Why do we allow them to control our supply of antibiotics? It is insanity. We need to bring the supply chains home. Made in America needs to be the standard, not a novelty. And we do that by unleashing American energy. Drill, baby, drill. Cheap energy is the lifeblood of a manufacturing economy. We have the resources under our feet to be the richest nation on earth. The Democrats are just refusing to let us touch them. We also need to talk about the uni party. The betrayal often comes from inside the House. We have too many Republicans in name only, rhinos, who are more comfortable making deals with Chuck Schumer than fighting for their own constituents. We need to primary them. We need to replace the Mitch McConnells and the Mitt Romneys with people who actually believe in the platform. The Republican Party cannot be a Democrat-light party. It must be a populist, nationalist, conservative Labour Party that fights for the working man against the corporate oligarchy. The healthcare system is another swamp that needs draining. The pharmaceutical companies own the FDA and the CDC. We saw that clearly during the pandemic. We need to ban the revolving door where a regulator approves a drug and then goes to work for the company that makes it 6 months later. We need to release the data on vaccine injuries. We need to hold these companies liable for the harm they cause. They have enjoyed legal immunity for too long. When you take away the liability shield, you'll see a lot more honesty about safety and efficacy. Jasmine Crockett and her ilk rely on the premise that the government is the solution to every problem. Our counterargument must be that the government is the problem. We need to slash the size of the federal workforce. We don't need a Department of Education telling local schools what to teach. Abolish it. Send the money back to the states. Let parents decide where their kids go to school. Universal school choice is the civil rights issue of our time. It breaks the monopoly of the teachers' unions and gives every child, regardless of zip code, a chance at a real education. We must also build our own media ecosystem. We cannot rely on the New York Times or CBS to tell the truth. They have proven over and over again that they are activists, not journalists. We need to support independent creators, alternative platforms, and free speech zones like X and Rumble. The only way to bypass the gatekeepers is to build a new gate. They are losing their audience because they lost their credibility. We have to be there to catch those people who are waking up. The legal system needs reform to stop lawfare. We need legislation that allows defendants to move cases out of jurisdictions that are 95% hostile to them. You cannot get a fair trial as a Trump supporter in Washington, D.C. It is statistically impossible. We need venue changes to neutral ground. And we need to hold prosecutors accountable for malicious prosecution. If you bring a bogus case to destroy a political opponent, you should lose your license and face jail time. Ultimately, the battle is spiritual. It is about what kind of nation we want to be. Do we want to be a nation under God, with liberty and justice for all? Or do we want to be a godless, socialist collective where the state is the supreme authority? The Democrats have made their choice clear. They booed God at their convention. They attack religious liberty at every turn. We must be unapologetic about our faith and our values. We don't need to force them on anyone, but we sure as hell shouldn't be ashamed of them. The speech by Jasmine Crockett was useful in one regard. It showed us exactly who they are. They are arrogant, they are disconnected, and they are ruthless. They will use every lever of power to maintain their grip. But they are also fragile. Their entire worldview is built on lies. Lies about gender, lies about climate, lies about the economy, and lies about history. And lies, no matter how loudly shouted, cannot stand forever against the truth. We are approaching a Flight 93 election. This is it. If we lose this next one, if we allow them to cement their power, to grant amnesty to 20 million illegals, to pack the Supreme Court, there will be no coming back. The demographic and structural changes will be permanent. That is why the energy is so high. That is why the stakes are so high. We aren't just voting for a person. We are voting for the survival of the American idea. So when you hear them scream corruption at us, laugh in their faces. Point to the Biden crime family. Point to the insider trading of Nancy Pelosi. Point to the sham contracts of the Green New Deal. Don't let them set the frame. We set the frame. The frame is, they are looting the country, and we are here to stop the robbery. This is the message we need to take to the Thanksgiving table, to the water cooler, and to the ballot box. We need to be happy warriors. We know we are right. We know that our policies lead to prosperity and peace. We saw it for 4 years. We lived it. We know what is possible. And we know that the nightmare we are living through right now is artificial. It was created by bad choices, and it can be fixed by good ones. The future belongs to us, not because we are entitled to it, but because we are the only ones willing to fight for the things that make life worth living: faith, family, and freedom. Jasmine Crockett represents the past, the tired, angry, divisive politics of identity. We represent the future, a united, strong, and prosperous America where everyone plays by the same rules. So let them have their committee hearings. Let them have their viral clips. We will take the country. We will take the future. And we will make America great again. And now, having laid out the stakes and the battle plan, let's take a look at the specific players who are going to be crucial in this fight. Who are the rising stars on our side that the left is terrified of? We know they hate Noem, but who else is on their hit list? Because if you want to know who is effective, just look at who the media is attacking the hardest. If you want to know who is truly effective in the Republican Party, who actually keeps the Democrats up at night, you don't look at who the New York Times praises for being moderate or bipartisan. You look at who they are trying to destroy. You look at who they are dragging through the mud, who they are investigating, and who they are mocking on Saturday Night Live. That is your list of the most valuable players in the America First movement. The attacks on Kristi Noem during this hearing were a badge of honor. It means she matters. It means she is a threat to their hegemony. But she is not alone. Look at the relentless assault on Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. The media spent 2 years calling him Death Santis because he refused to close his schools and destroy his state's economy during COVID. They lied about his Don't Say Gay bill, which was actually a common-sense law preventing the sexual indoctrination of kindergartners. Why did they attack him so viciously? Because he took a swing state and turned it into a fortress of freedom. He showed that conservative policies work. He showed that you can fight the woke corporations like Disney and win. That terrified them. They need you to believe that fighting the culture war is a losing strategy, but DeSantis proved that fighting the culture war is how you win landslides. Look at the way they treat J.D. Vance, a kid from the Rust Belt who wrote a book explaining the struggles of the white working class. The media loved him when he was just an author explaining the hillbilly plight to liberals. But the moment he became a MAGA senator, the moment he started questioning the endless war in Ukraine and demanding trade protection for American workers, they turned on him. They called him a sellout. They called him dangerous. Why? Because he represents the intellectual future of the movement. He can articulate the America First agenda better than almost anyone. He understands the connection between the hollowing out of our manufacturing base and the opioid crisis. That kind of clarity is dangerous to the globalist establishment. And let's look at the legal warriors like Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas. The Bushira establishment in Texas tried to impeach him. The Democrats cheered them on. Why? Because Ken Paxton has been the tip of the spear in suing the Biden administration. He has stopped them in court over the border, over mandates, over environmental overreach. He is effective. So, naturally, they tried to remove him from office with a sham impeachment that collapsed when the evidence was actually presented. This is the pattern. If you fight, they try to kill you politically. If you surrender, they invite you to the cocktail parties. The same goes for Kari Lake in Arizona. Whether you agree with every tactic she uses or not, you cannot deny that she is a fearless communicator who refuses to accept the media's framing. They hate her because she came from their world. She was a news anchor, and she defected. She knows their tricks. She knows how the sausage is made. And she calls them out to their faces. When she tells a reporter, "I'm not going to answer your loaded question because you are fake news," she is breaking the unwritten rule that Republicans must always be polite to the people who are trying to destroy them. The base loves it because it is cathartic. We are tired of the polite losers. We want the rude winners. We also have to acknowledge the brave voices in the House who stand with people like Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene gets attacked daily. They call her crazy. They tried to strip her of her committee assignments. But why? Because she forces recorded votes. She forces the Democrats to put their names on their radical policies. She demands transparency on Ukraine funding. She brings articles of impeachment against corrupt officials. She disrupts the club. In the old days, Congress was a gentleman's club where everyone got along and the country got sold down the river. MTG threw a wrench in the gears. And for that, she is public enemy number one. But it's not just politicians. The left is terrified of the new ecosystem of truth-tellers. They are terrified of Tucker Carlson. When Fox News took him off the air, they thought they had silenced him. Instead, he went to X, Twitter, and his audience grew. He interviewed Donald Trump during the GOP debates and got hundreds of millions of views, dwarfing the cable news ratings. He went to Argentina to interview Javier Milei. He went to Russia to interview Putin, not to endorse him, but to do actual journalism and hear the other side, something the legacy media refuses to do. Tucker represents the death of the mainstream media's monopoly on information. They can't control the narrative anymore, and that panic is what drives their calls for censorship. They are scared of Elon Musk. Here is the richest man in the world, who could have just bought an island and retired. Instead, he bought the digital town square to save free speech. He released the Twitter files, proving the government's censorship collusion. He restored the accounts of banned conservatives. He exposed the woke mind virus. The attacks on Elon, the investigations, the lawsuits, the hit pieces calling him an anti-Semite, are all punishment for taking away their censorship tool. They used to be able to make a phone call to Twitter and have a story buried. Now they have to compete in the marketplace of ideas, and they are losing. This is the team we have on the field. It is a team of disruptors. And that is exactly what the moment calls for. You cannot reform a system this corrupt with conventional politicians. You need people who are willing to break things. You need people who don't care about being invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Jasmine Crockett and her colleagues in that hearing room represent the establishment protecting its turf. They represent the managed decline of America. The people I just mentioned represent the American Renaissance. The 2024 election and beyond is going to be a battle between these two forces. The force of the establishment, backed by the media, the deep state, the universities, and the corporate boardrooms. And the force of the people, backed by independent media, populist politicians, and the sheer will of the American working class. When you watch these hearings, when you see the theatrics and the feigned outrage, realize that it is all a show designed to demoralize you. They want you to think, oh, look how powerful they are. Look how they are grilling our guys. We can't win. That is the wrong takeaway. The correct takeaway is, look how desperate they are. Strong movements don't need to hold show trials. Strong movements don't need to censor their opponents. Strong movements run on their record. The Democrats have no record to run on, so they have resorted to the tactics of a third world dictatorship. We have the momentum. The cultural vibe has shifted. You can feel it. It's becoming cool to be a patriot again. You see it in the music charts with Oliver Anthony and Jason Aldean. You see it in the success of movies like Sound of Freedom that the Hollywood elites tried to suppress. You see it in the sports stadiums where Let's Go Brandon chants break out spontaneously. The sleeping giant has awakened. The average American is patient, but when you push him too far, when you come for his kids, when you destroy his dollar, he pushes back. And he pushes back hard. Jasmine Crockett made a mistake in that hearing. She thought she was dunking on MAGA. She thought she was creating a viral moment that would help her party. But what she really did was remind millions of Americans why they left the Democrat Party in the first place. She reminded them of the condescension, the elitism, the hypocrisy, and the disconnect. She reminded us that these people do not respect us. And respect is a two-way street. If they don't respect us, they don't deserve to rule us. So, as we close this analysis, I want to leave you with a challenge. Don't just be a spectator. The time for sitting on the couch and yelling at the TV is over. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment. If you have a platform, use it. If you have money, donate it to the fighters, not the squishers. If you have time, volunteer to be a poll watcher. If you have courage, run for school board. We need to fill every vacuum they have created. We need to occupy every space they have abandoned. We are going to win this fight. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Because the alternative is a dark age of totalitarianism that our children do not deserve. We are the heirs to the men who crossed the Delaware, the men who stormed Normandy, and the men who walked on the moon. We do not surrender. We do not quit. And we certainly do not let a group of corrupt, incompetent, power-drunk politicians steal our country from us. The hearing is over. The gavel has banged. But the verdict hasn't been rendered yet. The verdict comes from you. It comes from we the people. And on Election Day, we are going to deliver a verdict so loud that even the deaf ears in Washington, D.C. will have to hear it. We are taking our country back. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.